And welcome to the Week 5 overview. I'm just going to go over some of the more important aspects of Week 5 so everyone can sort of see where we're going to go before you actually get into the work, give you a little bit more focus. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the literature review one more time and do some more work on filling in some more details. So your milestone 3 for this week will have you adding some more information. So for instance, for each article, you're going to write some good description of the research design. We'll go over what that is here in a minute. You're also going to be looking at what their research question was. We'll go through what that is here in just a minute also. You're going to look at the criminological theory that they used, which I will cover very briefly because we've already done that once before. Then you're going to restate the methodology, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and explain how the research design informed the methodology used or vice versa. Then you're also going to collect, how do they collect their data? You're going to ask essentially how do they collect their data and from whom was the data collected. These are important questions, so we're going to go over what they are here in just a minute, but let's go through the rest of this. Also for each article, you're going to choose why, in your opinion, they should use qualitative or quantitative research methodology for that particular article. Then you're going to refer back to your advantages and disadvantages that you outlined for week 4 for this purpose. And then you're going to describe this all in one short paragraph for each of the literature reviews that you have. And then for each article, you're going to explain what methods the author used to protect the validity of the investigations and not project their own assumptions or other biases into the evidence that they collected. And you want to also substantiate why you think they did, how you think they did protect that validity. Don't say, well, they just did. No, you'll find there are things they did in there. If you look, every study will try to make sure that you understand how it was that they did away with any biases or prejudices in the data, because if they didn't, they know they're going to be criticized, and they want everyone to know what they did to make sure that they did away with as much criticism as possible for their study. Then you're also going to look for and describe any ethical considerations that were addressed in the article. So, for instance, you might find out that confidentiality of the participants was of great importance, because otherwise they would likely get themselves in some big trouble because they were either involved in the study or that it was disclosing some aspect of their life. For instance, if you were looking at people who were drug takers or drug addicts, for instance, getting that kind of information out to the public in the wrong place could give them unnecessary grief. And so confidentiality became an important ethical consideration. All right, so you're just going to be buffing up the literature analysis more. As we said before, you're going to add more data to it from your an additional review of each of your articles. All right, now let's get into this idea first of what is a research question. Research questions are essentially a focus for your research study. Let's actually look at the definition of this very quickly, see it from your own materials here. It's an answerable inquiry into a specific concern or issue, and it's the initial step in a research project. That's a very broad definition, but what a research question does for us is to focus our research project so that it comes to a specific result that will be of some importance to us, because it gives us some sort of meaningful information that we need to either mitigate or prevent a particular problem that we have studied. So in a research question, we ask literally a question with a question mark at the end of it, a single sentence, and that will be the focus. So let me give you an example. In my research study that I've used in these videos, I was studying what are the effective means of preventing residential burglaries. Okay, so there are two different kinds of means. One could be a device and one could be a tactic. A tactic, for instance, would be leaving the lights on at night when you're not there. Of course, a device would be something like a burglar alarm. Okay, so my research question here would be, what in priority order are the most effective methods of preventing residential burglary? Very simple. That's the question. What that will do is it'll end up giving me an answer in priority order of what is the most effective method, or in this case device, as the case may be, that prevents residential burglary. So we would go out and study, for instance, all the homes that have been burglarized. These are the ones that are the failures, so to speak. We'll look at how many of those, for instance, had burglar alarms, how many of those had the tactic of leaving the light on, how many of those had, the tactic of making sure there was no newspapers left outside or mail left in the mailbox indicating that a person's not been home and won't be home for a while, that kind of tactic. We'd have essentially a laundry list from the best all the way down to the end of what are the most effective methods. And we can then use that information to then make up a brochure for our citizenry, in which we can say, okay, if you want to prevent residential burglary, here is the best and most effective methods we found in our research, which, by the way, could also include something like a neighborhood watch program, all this stuff that we would throw in there. But we'd have it in what is the most effective. And we would then have a cost analysis along with that, so that then people could make their choice on what they want to do to try to prevent residential burglary. All right, so that's a simple research question. You in your domestic violence area, for instance, you might have something like, again, not something too broad, like why is domestic violence happening? No, that's way too broad. Your research would be going on forever. And it can't be, too narrow, such as why did domestic violence happen in this one case, because that doesn't really give us much meaningful information. Something in between is what we're looking for. So it might be something like, how likely is a child who sees significant violence in the home to repeat the process by becoming a domestic violence perpetrator themselves? That might be your research question. That gives you some good, meaningful results, because you're looking for a specific cause, and you wonder how likely is it that is at least one of the important causes of domestic violence. And you can then use that information, if you find out that it is in fact one of the big causes, to then find ways to try to mitigate that problem of violence being done in the home. And one of the ways may be a zero tolerance of domestic violence, so that once we see violence going on in the home, we take all sorts of measures to make sure it never happens again, and that everyone in the home and in the family knows that that's not acceptable conduct from society's point of view, and that kind of thing. So you can see how we can now become more effective just from that one study alone. Now, that's the research question. Again, it's going to focus your research. Now let's look for research design. Research design is how you are going to make up a study to actually answer the research question. You've got to go out and collect data in the world somewhere that will give you the answer to the question that you've asked. If you've asked the right question, then you've got to have the right design to give you an accurate answer to that question. All right, so in that regard, we do lots of things. We look for certain very important things. Of course, we've got to throw in our research question right there in the beginning, because that's going to focus everything. And then we usually have a theory that we think may be the cause of whatever problem it is we're studying. And so we want to throw that theory in there as the basis for our study. So, for instance, if domestic violence is your study area, and you're looking for the cause being possibly children seeing violence in the home as a way to perpetrate or to perpetuate the crime, then your theory might be something like, I don't know, maybe a strain theory, something like one of the theories that would say that when people see this stuff going on, they think it's the way that people should act. and then that becomes your theory. And the reason why you have a theory there is because we want it to be related to something that is the basis for why you think or why you think the answer should be a certain thing. If you think that the seeing violence in the home and domestic violence situation is really the biggest cause for continuing perpetration of this crime, then that theory should be addressed as part of the research design, so we can then test that theory and see whether your results are telling us yes, you're right, or maybe you're not quite on the right path, as the case may be. But at least we know more when we get the actual research study done. Now, the methodology has to do with whether we're going to do quantitative analysis or qualitative, or possibly both. A little bit of both. It's possible. For instance, you could have something that involves someone's feelings or why they did something. That would be qualitative rather than quantitative. But we can also take those results, categorize them, and then put them into a quantitative analysis to see how prevalent a particular reported cause of something is, for instance. So we can have both. But then you're gonna design that based on the advantages and disadvantages of both quantitative or qualitative analysis towards your answer to your research question. And then you're going to look at how we can possibly bias the results if we don't watch out. How we can maybe skew in some prejudices if we don't watch out. And so that methodology has to provide for ways in which we check to make sure we're not putting some biases or prejudices into the methodology itself, because we could put a study together where it just looks for what we call confirmation bias. It basically just looks for supporting information and doesn't look for the information that doesn't support it, in which case we're going to get half the truth rather than the whole truth. Okay. Then we're going to look for resources. We want to figure out how much it's going to cost to do this kind of study. How many people do we have to have involved? What do they have to do? That sort of thing. That's the practical aspect of actually getting out there and collecting the data. And then, of course, how are you going to collect it? Are you going to have an observation or a focus group? Are you going to have people just doing interviews? And if so, how are you going to make sure that you're getting a representative sample of people? That's the problem when you just do random interviews, is that you don't know whether the people who are willing to talk to you are biased in themselves, in the sense that people who want to talk to you maybe are the ones in a particular group, and so you're never going to see the other group because they don't want to talk to you. You got to think about that and put that into your thought processes to make sure that you're not in the collection of your data biasing your results. And then from whom will the data be collected? Is it going to be samples of different people? Is it going to be the entire population? And if so, how are you going to do that? How are you going to collect all this stuff? And then again, you got to make sure you're not biasing or prejudicing the results because of the way that you collect the data. Again, it's very easy to collect only part of the data rather than all of it, and maybe even the part that you want if you're biased or prejudiced and don't realize it, especially. Now, also, how will reliability and validity be ensured? That means, how do you make sure that you are not, through the data collection process, entering your own bias or prejudice involved in the design itself, okay? So we're going to get into the research question for your particular study a little bit later on, but it's something you need to think about now. You need to start focusing your thoughts on what research question do you want to answer. And the reason for that, of course, is it has to do with the project we did in week 4, in which I'm finding that too often the theme that was being talked about between all the different articles, they were sort of all over the place. Instead of there being a theme or commonality between these articles, there was just nothing common between them that you were describing as a class. And so it just shows that there's a misunderstanding of what that's all about. When you were doing the literature review, we're trying to find literature that is related to what we are going to do. And more than just, for instance, it's related to domestic violence, it's got to be related to the study that we're going to do. So we want to then look to see what is the common thread through all of the articles that we've read, and then describe that common thread, because then that common thread can give us more information about what we need to do. All right. I don't want to go on too long for this, but I just want to make sure everyone understands where we are in terms of research question and research design. And again, if there's any problems with understanding all this or any of it, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you.